great to just be speaking to so many friends. It's a great benefit, I guess, of 25 years in one tribe. Yeah, very fortunate. I think when I was thinking about renunciation, I thought what has always thrilled me is when I've met people like you from those early days who are willing to live in a way naked, in a way without protection or with less protection than is what we mean by conventional life. Yeah. So I mean the protection of money, of career, of family, of property. Now, most of us have some of that, but I guess all of us are trying to renounce that protection. And I found that really thrilling as a young man coming along, that this was possible and that one was okay. I remember sitting with people like Maitreya Bandhu or Jayaraja who were really old. They were probably mid-late 30s or something like that and didn't have any money. Whereas my intention had been to have at least a few million by that stage so that I'd be secure. And I was really excited by people who were alive, who were vibrant, and didn't have those things. They didn't have families, they didn't have property, they didn't have money. And that made me really rethink my life, which is why I'm here and I'm not driving a Morgan and living in Kensington. And happily so, I should say, because I think there's a real cost to that. I'll come on to that later. But yeah, something about that kind of that willing to live with that danger, I guess. That's what I think of, is when you renounce, you're turning towards danger. But the benefit, and this is what I responded to in people like Maitreya Bandhu and Jayaraja and indeed Amoghachitra in those early days, was that a certain kind of aliveness. And I felt it in the communication, I felt it in their energy, and I felt it in, just what they were doing with their time. And you all know what I mean, I'm sure. It came earlier than that, actually. I remember when I was very young being excited by this idea of people who would get a one-way ticket to Cairo and just have to get home somehow, back to England. Yeah, no money, one-way ticket, and they just had to live on their wits. I found that really exciting. And of course, that means depending on other people as well. That's the only way they're going to get home, is with the help of other people. I remember hearing about Loka Bandhu going and doing street retreats in the West End of London, and the rule was you had to go and sleep out and had no money. So again, you had to depend on effectively the kindness of others. But also you'd be facing the risk that you didn't get that kindness, that it was cold, that you were hungry, and that you didn't get, and certainly status-wise, that you'd be looked upon as a beggar. The Buddha, his rule that you weren't allowed to retain any food or provisions from one day to the next, that's always it still does really excite me. Because presumably it would have been very possible, householders would say, well, look, why don't you take enough for the next couple of days? And here's some medicine in case you get sick later, and here's some robes for when yours wear out. And that, as you know, in the Vinaya is explicitly disallowed. No, you can only have what you need now. Again, you're exposing yourself to the vicissitudes of not getting, of reality, and therefore not getting what you want or need in the moment. And I remember falling in love with a woman when I was younger who was an actress, and she was involved in a very particular form of acting that was completely improvised. There was no script. There would just be a white circle drawn on the stage, and sometimes there might be a sort of myth that was there, like they had a particular archetype that she was playing and her co-actor was playing, and sometimes not. But there'd be an audience, and they'd come into that circle, and what would happen is what would happen. They would have to just improvise based on that moment, on what arose in that moment. I found that thrilling, and I found her thrilling, and and I really, there was some, it was clearly, it was one of those mad love things. She was even going out with someone else. It was a right mess. In fact, she was going out with the guy who was the other actor who ran this company. Anyway, it was a right mess, but it was clearly massive projection, because she was, she embodied this kind of willingness to face the unknown, to face that unknown, that danger. And then I discovered Karuna appeals. And for those of you who, some of you I know in this room have done Karana appeals, and that is very much that experience repeated again and again. You are going out and you're being, a beggar. I remember one woman calling me a beggar on the street, and I was furious that she would, but actually that's true. I was going out asking for people's money, people I didn't know, and they didn't want to talk to me, and I knew they didn't want to talk to me, and I knew they didn't want to give me money, and yet I was going out and doing that anyway. And every day, I was just talking to a couple of you on this. Now, who was it? Was it Akasha Mitra? No, it was Bayanara was saying 4 o'clock every day. You just get this sinking in the stomach because you know it's just going to be time to go out soon. You're going to have to go out and do this again. But I remember on the best nights, I remember being out. It's freezing cold. Often this was autumn appeals, whatever. Often get cold. Dark night. No one else around. People, when they see your badge, they avoid you. They put their eyes down and walk past. Guaranteed. And actually feeling incredibly alive. Like there's the moon, there are the stars, there are cats, there are the foxes. That's your company. There's no one else who wants to be with you. Yeah, no one else. And you look down the street and there's all these window after window with like warm yellow light coming out and TVs flickering, and you can almost smell the food. Sometimes you literally smell the food, when they open the door. This lovely, roast chicken or whatever it is they're eating, and this, I say, particularly this warm yellow light coming out of those windows, and you can just see it down the street, row after, house after house. But at my best, I really felt poor them. I thought, I'm living, and and for me that wasn't living. It was comfortable, they were warm, they had food, they knew what they were doing that evening, no one was going to insult them, no one was going to dismiss them. And I felt so grateful that I was doing this and not that. I'm not saying that happened all the time, but that at its best, that was what I felt, because I was alive, and I was there in this kind of it rolls off the tongue, but this crucial situation. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I really didn't, and I knew that the only way something good was going to be what happened next was if I was present, and if I connected with myself, I connected with them, and if I took risks, if I dared to say something to them that they didn't really want to hear. Like, no, I do understand that you give to a lot of charities, of course I do, but there are people who really need your help, and maybe you could give to people like that as well. That is not what one feels like doing when somebody's frowning at you from their doorstep with their dinner sort of simmering behind. But yeah, at its best, that's how I felt, and that's actually what got me into Dharma life. Not particularly. I mean, meditation I liked, and classes were good, but I loved that. That really brought me alive. That situation. I wasn't even a mitra when I was doing those appeals at first, and that's what really lit me up, as well as the people who were training me in that, like Jaraja. And Manjusra. So I'm going to quote. It seems a good moment to quote the Buddha here. The phrase the quote you'll all know. Cramped is this life at home. Dusty indeed its sphere. Open the going forth. Open the going forth. And all of us have gone forth. That's why we're in the order. But the problem is that even once we join the order, of course, then we start to, well, especially as we get older, and speaking for myself, I start to value comfort. I start to value safety. I start to value knowing what's going to happen next. When I was young, I used to love going backpacking, travelling, and I used to love not knowing where I was going to stay that night. I'd come to a new town or a new city. I didn't have any idea where I was going to stay, where I was going to eat. I mean, these days, I use these, maybe some of you do because we're all getting on, these interdental brushes. You know these little interdental brushes? You've got the pink ones, the little one, and then the green ones, the big gaps, right? I don't even like running out of any of them. Like, as soon as I get down to just 3 or 4 in my drawer, I'll order some more online. So I never run out of interdental brushes, and I keep a spare in my travel wash bag, yeah? That's quite a long way from turning up in Kathmandu, let's say, with no idea where you're going to stay that night. That's quite a big gap, isn't it? And yet, between that and this, and yet I am sort of the same person. In fact, I'm the sort of the same person who's been practicing the Dharma for 25 years, yeah? So clearly there are forces at work that we have to resist as we get older. Yeah, safety, comfort, the known. You turn up here, what's the first thing doing? You look at the programme. All right, so so what time is the picture? 7:40. Okay, and then what time? Okay, breakfast, and then then a talk. We'd like to know what's going to happen, and I think we have to fight quite actively against that as we get older. I was talking to David Mitra a few months ago. It was last year actually, and he, as you might know, has gone through cancer treatment the last 2 or 3 years for prostate cancer, and it's pretty horrible treatment, as we know, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. And I said, how's it been? He said, actually, it's been fine. Some of you will know him quite well. Probably everyone knows him a bit. He said, actually, what really helped was when I was young, I took a vow. I looked at older people and I saw how much they just kind of closed things down to what was familiar. So I took a vow when I was young that I would always be open to new experience. And he said, and that's how I viewed this cancer treatment. And actually, that's really helped. That's how he's been able to deal with it. And I thought, what a brilliant vow to take. And I really haven't taken it. But I'll come on to what I'm working on in a minute. So yeah, and I think, and it's interesting, you look at these pieces like regrets of the dying. Yeah, 5 top regrets of the dying. And what's interesting is one of them is regretting, one of the main ones is regretting what people regret what they didn't do. They don't actually regret what they did do. They don't say that, they say they regret what they didn't do. And I think that's really interesting because I would suggest, certainly based on my experience, those kind of regrets. So when I felt a bit fearful, I thought, well, what might happen if I do that? What might happen if I talk to that person? What might happen if I give away that thing? It's fear, I would suggest, that stops us doing things. So that's quite interesting. It's basically people saying what they regret is when they lived from fear and therefore didn't do what they felt moved to do. I think, recently I've been studying Milarepa's, the seminars on Milarepa that Bhante gave in the 70s, and which were published very recently for the first time in the complete works. There are 2 volumes, as you probably know. They're fantastic. I'm still on volume 1. I've been working through that for a while. And what's one interesting thing in there is the distinction that Bhante makes between disgruntlement and disillusionment. I don't know if you're familiar with this distinction between disgruntlement and disillusionment. And I'll tell a little story to illustrate. I was on the team at Gugoloka, as you mentioned, actually, with Praniketu and others last summer on the ordination course. And one of the things you look forward to is, or most of you will know, is the day off towards the end. Yeah, you get a day off, right? And Maitri Bandi decided very clearly we're going to go to Via Hyosa. Yeah, we're going to have our day off at the end of the course. We're going to go to Via Hyosa. So the team went together, and one of the highlights, of course, was Gusta Pizza. Anyone not been to Gusta Pizza? Maybe one or two of you. Gusta Pizza. So we went to Gusta Pizza. Of course, first we went to the Valor chocolate shop. So we had churros and Valor hot chocolate. So actually we weren't that hungry by the time we got to Gusta Pizza. But we had gone for a swim, that's true. But I should have said all the way through the course, because I was looking forward to this pizza. I mean, I did enjoy the food at Gugoloka, but you don't get pizza there generally, and you certainly don't get cheese. Anyway, and so I was really looking forward to this pizza. And you know what it's like when you're craving something, of course. It's a whole thing. It's a whole image, isn't it? It's like an image of happiness. It's an image of happiness. We got to Gusta Pizza. First of all, we had to wait a while to be served. We did get a table outside, that was nice, but we had to wait a while to be served. They were very busy, there was loads of tourists there. So it took a while. We got our pizza, and I don't know how to put this other than to say it was a pizza. It was just a pizza. It was like crust and with tomato sauce on top, and then some different toppings, and then some cheese melted on top. That's what it was. It was actually a pizza. It was a pizza. I was so disappointed. I can't tell you. I was so disappointed, and it was perfectly good. They're quite good pizzas. It's worth going, but really not with that kind of idea that I had. So, I was disgruntled, a bit disgruntled. I was like, this isn't that good actually. The service is slow, the pizza's all right, but I was disgruntled. Fortunately, there was a little bit of disillusionment. I'll just explain Bhante's distinction. So disgruntlement, of course, is this isn't right, this isn't good enough, this service isn't good enough, this pizza isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, it's too hot in here, there should be, whatever. It's like it's that samsara is not working. It needs to be reorganised, needs to be done better. Yeah, this needs to be done better. That's disgruntlement, and we're very familiar with that. It's the whole world of customer complaints, right? Disillusionment, on the other hand, of course, is of course actually seeing it'll never be good enough. It'll always let me down. It's always just going to be pizza. That, of course, as we all know, is what we're striving towards when we reflect on the dukkha inherent in all conditioned experience. Fortunately, there was a little bit of that. I'm glad to say, because I had just been on retreat for 4 months, I did have that moment. Oh, of course, it's just pizza. It's just pizza. But I think this illusion, of course, is always there, and there's a panic, I think, that comes when we are asked to renounce, because we haven't fully seen through things. There is a panic that it does come in when we're asked to renounce. I think it's an echo of the panic that must come at the moment of death, actually, which we're told about, aren't we? That we're so used to having this body and these senses, and then we feel them slipping away. We're told that one by one the senses withdraw, and that induces panic. And that therefore what we instinctively do, of course, is we grasp after another body. That's what happens in the bardo. It's so uncomfortable to not have a sense experience. We grasp after another body. And I think a little mirror of that is what happens when people like me say, please give me some of your money. Maybe even quite a lot of your money. Or when somebody says, can you teach this class? Or can you lead this study group? Or can you give some time to help me with I don't know, the washing up, the rota, we're short on washing up, which we are, by the way, for lunch. Can you, I think that's what happens is we think, oh no, kind of, but what about me? What'll happen? What'll happen? What if I don't have enough money when I get old to look after myself? And that's infinite, because if we need serious care, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, right? What if I don't have enough money? What if I get really stressed? If I take on that class, I'll get all stressed, and then what about that? Or but if I go and help with that, then I'll be too busy, and I really want to relax. It's the end of the order weekend, etc., etc. We think, what about me? So I think that's an echo of what happens. Well, not an echo. Well, maybe it's an echo of when we died before. Yeah, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? By the way, I do recommend Anala's book on rebirth. Really excellent. If you have any doubts about rebirth, read Anala's book. So what's the solution? Well, we know the solution. We're told to live simply. We're told to renounce self. What really struck me also on this retreat recently, I was reading Bante's memoirs from Kalimpong. What really struck me was how simply he was willing to live. We all know that he lived according to the Vinaya. He didn't eat after midday. Those kind of things that none of us would dream of doing, I'm sure. Living on very little money. I remember there's one part where it's winter, it's getting cold, and he just has his 2 cotton robes, and he worries. Well, he thinks, I'd like to get a woolen blanket so I can be a bit warm, but he worries that it's indulgent to get the cheapest blanket he can buy to stay warm. He was willing to live with that kind of simplicity. At a certain point, he can't afford the 25 rupees a month to keep renting the hut that he lives in, so he has to give up this hut and move into the premises of the Young Men's Buddhist Association, which is this kind of drafty wooden building, which is also where all the classes happen and people are coming and going. So obviously there's that whole area of living simply, which you've touched on, Praniketu. I think there's an interesting sutta that I came across in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Patalya Sutta. And Patalya is a householder, but he comes to the Buddha. As far as he's concerned, he's not a householder, because he has renounced all his wealth. He's given it to all his sons. He lives very simply. He doesn't. He lives a simple diet and a few clothes, and yet the Buddha salutes him or greets him as householder. And Patalya gets really angry. He says, "I'm not a householder. Why are you calling me householder? I've renounced all these things." And the Buddha says, I'll quote, householder, says it again, householder, the cutting off of affairs, as you describe it, is one thing. But in the Noble One's discipline, the cutting off of affairs is different. The cutting off of affairs is different. And he then goes to enunciate these 8 precepts. I'm not enough of a scholar to know where that fits in with a normal list of 8 precepts, and it does culminate with going forth in a way from arrogance and conceit. But what's very interesting is he talks about the precepts, that is renunciation. If you want to be a noble one and not a householder, you need to practice the precepts, which of course is going against self-clinging. All the precepts are against going forth from self. So I now want to just mention confession in this context, because I think that when we confess, well, firstly, we're definitely in touch with that aliveness, that danger. Why is it dangerous? Because we're actually doing the opposite of what our conceit, what our ego, if you like, wants to do, which is to present ourselves to the world as a good person. And in our case, as a good Buddhist, a good order member, and so forth. As soon as we start telling people that we're obsessing about chin-up bars or whatever it is, we're revealing something we're deeply embarrassed about. That actually this is so weak. What am I doing? It's embarrassing, and of course we don't want to do that. And I am struck at how often we're reluctant to confess. I've been in chapters 15 years, and there's a really deep reluctance in me and certainly in others to do that. And I just wonder if that might be an interesting question: is why are we reluctant to confess? Is it connected to this kind of conceit? Could that be an act of renunciation to confess more fully? Okay, I need to wrap up. I'm going to leave you with 3 questions for your groups now, for this group that you're about to go to. One is, what's your greatest success in renunciation? One is, what are you working on at the moment? And what is it that you have no intention of renouncing? Yeah, those are the 3 questions. I was going to give some examples. I suppose I could talk about money just briefly, and I think that applies for me. That applies to all 3. It's no surprise I've ended up a fundraiser. I've been obsessed about money since I was a kid. Yeah, I wanted to be a millionaire. It's always been the thing for me. So, but going from that to an investment banker to a fundraiser is all of a piece, believe me. And it's very much a practice for me as well to give up money, as I'll explain. My greatest success, I would say, is that I think, largely renounced money as a symbol of love. Yeah, I think I wanted to be a millionaire because I wanted to be loved and admired, and loved really. And I think I'm over that. I think. Number 2, what am I working on? Well, money is still a source of comfort and security for me. If there are things I can't afford on my support, then I can buy it from my savings. Everybody's got their stash, or most people have their stash. I've got my stash too. Unlike many, a lot of you will have it in something like a house that you can't access. I don't have a house, but I have money in the stock market and in ethical stocks. So if I want something or need something, like last year I bought a rowing boat. There's no way I could afford, what did it cost, like £4,000. There's no way I could buy that on my support, but I could take it out of my savings, and I bought that boat. Yeah, so and I can buy interdental brushes whenever I run short. Yeah, there's never any problem there. So I think I'm still working on sustaining comfort, convenience, and basically what I want. Yeah. So that's something I'm working on. How am I working on? Well, I've decided, and I'm saying it publicly here in front of you, I've decided to give, I can't give yet, to lend the whole, I can't even say the whole lot, most of it, to Windhorse Trust, yeah, for them to use for Dharma projects. So I'm especially keen on them funding new communities. So I'll lend it to Windhorse Trust long term. I'll lose the stock market returns, and I'll lose the easy access to it. To buy things like boats. What are the things I'm not willing to give it away? That's quite interesting. I'm not willing to give it away. I'm also not willing. I've also on top of that, I have a pension fund as well. I couldn't give that away because it's all locked up. But I definitely I don't seem to be willing to renounce the idea of having some money for my old age. Yeah, of course, you've got to decide how much that needs to be. But that's something I don't seem to be willing to renounce at the moment. And there's lots of other things I could mention as well. My appearance, I don't want to give up on an athletic physique. I don't want to give up on dressing reasonably smartly, and so there's lots of things I could mention. I'll end with an image of. So those are the 3 questions you could talk about in your group. I'll end with an image which isn't one I know very deeply, but I'm very excited by, which is the image of the dakini. I think when I was meditating this morning, I thought the dakini reflects that vision that I talked about at the beginning of people who are willing to live naked, completely without fear, in the cremation ground, with life, with energy, and actually with real authentic communication. I think that, the dakini is inspiration, but it's also, as we know, the esoteric sangha refuge. And I think it's that kind of absolutely kind of cutting and authentic, the best it's cutting because it's loving communication that probably, just like attracted me from those people I mentioned, Amoghachita, Maitreya Bandhu, Jayaraja, probably attracted you. And as we know, it's informed by love. The dakinis are often red, and it's that animates our sangha. So it's both the exemplar of people who are renouncing things, like those guys were for me back then, and still are, and the communication that comes from that aliveness, that love. So I think the dakini is actually a brilliant image for what we move towards as we renounce. I'll leave it there.